Guests here now deeply involved in that hearing and deeply involved in all the unfolding matters. Trey Gowdy chairs the House Oversight Committee. And, sir, welcome back here on America's Newsroom. We got a lot to go through here, okay? I want viewers to be able to follow it. There's a lot to take in. Oftentimes you come on the air and you say, I don't have the answers, I have the questions, all right? So here are my questions for you today. Specifically in the Trump dossier that broke last night, its connection to Hillary Clinton and the DNC. What do you need to know about that now, based on what information you have?
Bill, it is relevant who paid for the dossier. It's much more relevant who relied upon it. So my focus has always been whether or not the Department of Justice and the FBI relied upon an unsourced CI document to launch a counterintelligence investigation. So I want to know whether the nation's premier law enforcement agency relied on a document that looks like the National Enquirer prepared it.
Wow. Can you answer that question today? Did the FBI rely on it or not, sir?
You know, Bill, I think I can, but I want to be able to prove it. And the fact that the Department of Justice, not the Obama Department of Justice, the Trump Department of Justice, will not give Congress access to that information says a lot about why we are looking into the Department of Justice and decisions they made and did not make. We should not have to ask twice whether or not the FBI relied upon a dossier to launch a counterintelligence investigation. You should have to ask once, but we have not had that question answered yet.
Even after the election last year, the FBI continued to pursue this for a period of time. What does your hunch tell you as to why you will not get answers out of this Department of Justice?
Oh, well, I don't like to rely on hunches, but since you asked nicely, I will tell you, I think the FBI is very interested in preserving its reputation. And frankly, I am too. I want them to be well regarded, but they can make mistakes like everyone else. And if they relied upon an unsourced, unvetted document to launch a really important investigation and use it in court filings, then I think our country is big enough to handle that truth. But they need to share that truth. And if they didn't rely upon it, then they need to tell us that. But so far, they haven't said one way or the other.
Yeah, why has Fusion GPS pled the fifth, sir?
Usually people plead the fifth when they think the answer is going to get them in trouble. The reason the story broke last night is because we took them to court, Bill. As you know, they pled the fifth as some hybrid fifth-first privilege. We took them to court. They were going to lose in court, which is why you saw the leak last night. The Democrats have been fighting us every step of the way to find out who paid for the dossier and whether or not it was relied upon. Yesterday, they went 15 years back in time to talk about apartment leases and bank loans, but they're not interested in who paid for the dossier and whether or not it was relied upon. So I'll be back this morning in a skiff on the Russia investigation trying to get answers.
I have three more questions. I hope you can answer the following. BuzzFeed broke this story in the weeks before the election last October on the dossier. NBC News has a major stake in BuzzFeed by way of NBC Universal, hundreds of millions of dollars by way of its parent company, Comcast. What do you think of that? And would you expect some sort of retraction or clarification from BuzzFeed?
The legal part of that is way above my pay grade. I will tell you this. There was a witness yesterday that we interviewed in Hipsey whose name is prevalent in the dossier. And of the allegations made against him in the dossier, he testified under oath, under penalty of perjury. Every allegation was false. So if you're a private citizen and someone is making false allegations against you and is publicized, then I think all that millions of dollars you made reference to with NBC, that may come in handy when they go to court.
On the uranium deal, what questions 7 years later remain about that as it relates to Hillary Clinton or the State Department or former President Obama?
It's not so much about Hillary Clinton for me. It is about whether or not CFIUS, which is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., had access to all the information they needed before they made a really important decision from a national security perspective. Again, if the FBI has an ongoing criminal probe involving a fact pattern, and they don't share it with the decision makers who are deciding whether or not to sell percentages of uranium leases in this country, then we have a problem. And I want to know what the FBI and the DOJ knew and who they shared it with.
Final question. Do you think Robert Mueller is the right person to head up this independent counsel? Well, when you consider his background with the FBI and when you consider who worked under him and who you're investigating today?
Bill, I think this is a really difficult political environment that we're in. I'm not sure you could find anyone not named Jesus that everyone would be happy with. I actually am satisfied with Robert Mueller, and if there are questions to ask him about other matters when this probe is over, be happy to do it. But investigations, they should follow facts, and it really shouldn't matter who's leading them. The facts are what direct it. So I know I'm in a small group among Republicans, but I actually have confidence he's going to reach the right conclusions for the right reasons, and that he'll have credibility with the American people when he's done.
So as of today, you're okay with Robert Mueller, correct?
As of yesterday, today, and probably tomorrow, unless something changes me, dissuades me from what I think is a lifetime of pretty solid service to our country.
Thank you for your time, sir. Trey Gowdy, the Republican.
For Democrats, investigations have a way of migrating, and the Clintons know that well from prior experience. Today, 2 brand new investigations were launched on the Hill as new information has come to light that raises questions about Russian influence during the Obama administration with this Uranium One sale, and also the FBI and Hillary Clinton's emails. Tonight, 2 of the top lawmakers behind these investigations join us on the story. We'll be hearing from Senator Chuck Grassley in just a moment, but we begin with House Oversight Committee Chairman, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy. Congressman, good evening. Great to have you here, as always. So let me start with the FBI and the email investigation. What is new there that causes a new look at this?
I think the most recent new thing is the allegation that Director Comey or the Bureau may have made up their mind in May of 2016, whereas they announced their decision in July. So they interviewed 24 witnesses after they had already made up their minds. That's the allegation. But Martha, it's more than that. There were Democrats that were really unhappy with the Department of Justice last fall. There were Republicans that were unhappy earlier in the year. And that's the one entity that everyone has to have confidence in. Even if you disagree with the decisions that are reached, you have to understand those decisions, and you have to have confidence that they were apolitical. So Chairman Gillette and I came up with really 6 questions that we think are pretty evenly divided in terms of what Democrats want to know and what Republicans, and the Department of Justice is not above scrutiny, and they're not above review. I have great respect for them, but they're not above scrutiny. In 2016, in my opinion, left a lot of unanswered questions for the department.
Yeah, I know one of those is why the Hillary Clinton investigation was discussed, and the Trump investigation in terms of the possibility of Russian collusion was not discussed. But in terms of what you just mentioned and the political aspect of this, is there any evidence that Loretta Lynch made a phone call, that she asked anyone before she took that meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac?
If there's evidence of that, Martha, I haven't seen it, and it has not been brought to my attention. But you put your finger on exactly why you need to have investigations. You need to come up with a list of witnesses, and of course she's on that witness list, and then you need to access the documents. Again, you and I are having this conversation because someone sought to access documents from the Department of Justice. So you do all of that, and then you do your interviews, transcribed interviews, which is my preferred way of doing it. And whatever you learn, you share in a public forum. But you don't start with public hearings. You end with public hearings. You have to do the hard work of investigating before you get to that point.
And in terms of that, do you expect that you will have access to anyone at the FBI who may have been privy to the writing of the Jim Comey draft when he started to put that together 2 months before reaching his conclusion about Hillary Clinton?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's going to be up to the Department of Justice. And so far, in some instances, we have gotten no better cooperation from the current Department of Justice than we did their predecessor. So that remains to be seen, whether or not the Department of Justice is cooperative. I would remind them of this. Congress created them, Congress funds them, and no entity is above oversight. I get oversight done on me every 2 years for sure, and more frequently than that, the Department of Justice is not above having to explain the decisions they reach or do not reach. And it doesn't have to be adversarial. But so far, it's been really difficult to get information from this Department of Justice, and I would recommend that they change that posture.
That's interesting. Here's Hillary Clinton and her reaction to the reopening of these 2 investigations.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years, and there's been no credible evidence by anyone. In fact, it's been debunked repeatedly and will continue to be debunked.
She and others, other Democrats on the Hill, Representatives Cummings and Representative Conyers, are both suggesting that this is just, haze being thrown at the Russia investigation in an effort to distract from the Trump investigation.
Well, I would tell Secretary Clinton and Mr. Conyers and Mr. Cummings, Republicans don't get to write the headlines. We don't get to decide what the media covers and what they don't cover. God knows they've been covering Russia since January. I spent all day in a skiff interviewing witnesses related to the Russia investigation. So I don't know where Mr. Conyers or Mr. Cummings or Secretary Clinton were today, but I know where I was, which is investigating allegations of collusion. So I'm at peace with what I'm doing, but Congress is actually capable of doing more than one investigation at a time. And there was a time when Democrats did not think Jim Comey was the second coming of Christ. Remember, last fall, Harry Reid wanted him prosecuted for a Hatch Act violation.
Sure do. Yeah,
so
it has cut
I don't
both
know
ways.
Where this.
I got to go, but before I go, have you found any evidence of collusion on the Trump-Russia collusion investigation?
Well, I'm going to be really careful not to do what I think the Department of Justice did, which is draw a conclusion before the end of the investigation. It's still ongoing. To date, there has not been a single witness who has provided a single piece of evidence supporting collusion, coordination, or conspiracy, but we are not through with the investigation.
Well, that opens up a lot of questions about the dossier, which we will save for another day,
yes,
and another interesting conversation with you as always. Congressman Trey Gowdy, thank you so much, sir. Good to see you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So my next guest has been calling on the